Welcome to another episode of the Finding Serenity in the Midst of Chaos podcast. Today, we are talking about how to stop binge eating and lose weight easily. This episode especially relates to if you're the kind of person who is feeling out of control with your eating and you've got no idea why you overeat or binge or how to stop it. You feel that you've tried everything but nothing works, and you have this love-hate relationship with food and with yourself. You will love this episode because at the end you will understand why overeating isn't actually your fault and understand how diets are helping you put more weight on and learn how you can lose weight without giving up any of the foods that you love. Buckle up because you will know what the real problem is, and spoiler alert, it isn't actually food. So I am so excited for this episode, so stay tuned. I cannot wait to introduce you to today's guest, Emily Hall. Hi, Emily. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello, thanks for having me. Really, really pleased to be here.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here for you to be here, and I cannot wait for our listeners to find out all that you're going to talk about, especially now that we are in December, coming up to Christmas, all the nice food, alcohol, everything in front of us. And I cannot wait for our listeners to hear. But before we do that, please tell us who you are, what you do, and who you help, Emily.
Yeah, great. So I'm Emily Hall, the Binge Eating Coach, and I help professional women, typically over the age of 40, but I do work with younger women who have struggled with their eating habits. Maybe they binge eat, they stress eat, they emotionally eat, or they overeat. And I help them go from a place of where they think about food 24/7, food completely controls their life. They don't have a great relationship with themselves. There's a lot of guilt and shame involved in that kind of overeating. And I take them from that place in just a few short weeks, and we get them to stop thinking about food 24/7. In fact, food isn't even a thing anymore.
Mm.
Stop those overwhelming thoughts about it and fall in love with themselves and their bodies, and I teach them how to, I guess we'll get into this in a bit later on, but how to cope with their emotions so that they're not using food to do the job for them, how to have a great relationship with themselves so they don't need food to feel better, all those kind of things. And we do that in a very short space of time because it
Mm.
doesn't have to take long to get food freedom. But unfortunately, we kind of bought into this idea that we've got to spend either years in therapy or, ages on a diet, the next hideous diet. So that's me in a nutshell.
Oh, wow, that's amazing. I mean, I don't even know where to start because, let's start with this. You said it wasn't about food. And you know what? It's funny. Um, from anyone that I know or any I work with, everyone knows how to lose weight, right? Yet
Absolutely.
a lot of people are still overweight, yet obese and whatever. And you touched on it already in the introduction. This isn't really about food, but what is it really about then?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it this way, nobody gets up in the morning and thinks to themselves, oh, do you know what I'm going to do this morning? I'm going to go and have 10 packets of biscuits. I'm going to shove them down my face, and then I'm going to hate myself afterwards, right? No one does that. So
Right.
it's really, it's so annoying when people go, if you're overweight, and I was overweight at a point in my life, and then they go, just stop eating. If it was that easy, we would not have an obesity crisis, right?
No,
Oh, yeah.
no.
Oh, why didn't I think of that? Actually, there's lots of different. It's just like, oh my God, oh, there's the missing piece.
Just stop eating and it'll be
No,
fine, right?
way, yeah, yeah. So, and if you take me as a case in point, there was a point in my life. So I'm a type 1 diabetic,
Oh,
and I
wow.
was binging, I was overeating, I was stress eating, all of that. And I was told at the time that, this is really bad for your diabetes, which it is, these sugar spikes. And, you could either have a leg amputated, you could go blind.
Wow.
That wasn't enough to stop me from overeating. Now, you would think that shock, the promise of those things, would be enough to stop somebody from overeating, but it wasn't. And eventually, long story short, I did lose the sight in my left eye,
Wow.
and that's permanent, but that didn't stop me either.
Oh,
because the issues go so much deeper. It's not about the food. No one chooses chocolate over their eyesight. They just don't. But actually, the issues are so much deeper than that. If you've got an unhealthy relationship with yourself, you're going to use food to feel better. If you've got a lot of trauma in your past, you're going to
mm,
use food to cover that up because it can feel quite painful to try and face that. If you're stressed all the time, you're going to use food. If you're unhappy in life and you're not doing what you want to be doing or what you love, you are going to use food. Each person, the way I describe it, has a kind of set of puzzle pieces, and we
mm,
have to work out what each person's puzzle pieces are in order to come out and not need food in the same way. All of this stuff, you can't diet it out. It's your thinking that's the problem. And actually,
yes.
diets,
Oh,
the gastric band's diets, they just don't address that thinking.
they don't, they don't. I mean, it's changing everything from the inside out because it is coming from the inside and outside. What we are seeing is just a symptom of the
Yeah.
deeper problem that you said. And just a couple of weeks ago, we talked about healing past trauma with using different tools because it's not something that, is gonna go away until you deal with it, right?
It doesn't go away. What happened until you deal with it? You're absolutely right. But a lot of people, especially with food issues, they go, "Well, I've pushed that. I've dealt with that. I've compartmentalized it." The problem you've
Mm,
got with that is to keep it in that compartment. You have to use a tool, and that tool is food. The
yeah.
food keeps it in that compartment. What we have to
Okay.
do is we have to heal that past trauma and ultimately let it go. And it's
Mm,
not about, blaming. I could have spent years, in fact, I did when I was in and out traditional therapy, just blaming my parents. And actually, that isn't right either.
mm,
What we have to do is we have to come to peace with what's happened and learn how to move on from it.
mm,
So then we're not constantly in that cycle of reliving past trauma. So that becomes the
yeah.
present. And then, of course, the whole time you're reliving that past trauma, blaming parents, whatever, blaming whoever,
Mm,
uh, you are going to use food to feel better because, the mind, it doesn't like that pain. It just wants the pleasure. It wants to move us away from pain all the time. And so food
mm.
becomes that kind of quick and easy fix.
Yeah, and just maybe slightly off topic, but it's interesting observation, and probably a lot of people observe this during the times of lockdown when everybody was locked in their houses, and they were away from what they loved and they weren't able to do what they wanted to do. So many people put on weight, and one of
Loads.
yeah, loads of people, including myself, it wasn't through lack of exercise either. It was just whatever it was. Again, it's maybe uh, protecting yourself from whatever is going on outside, the trauma, whatever. What is your views on that? I'm really interested to hear.
That's a really, really great question because people who have a weight issue, there is often a big, big reason for it.
Mm,
And, if you've never had a food issue, it can be sometimes quite difficult to get your head around. But I certainly see with a lot of clients who've been abused, for example, in childhood, weight is there to protect them.
mm,
Weight is
yeah,
there, in their words, not mine, to make them ugly. I hear that quite a lot. All of our mind's number one job is to keep us alive and keep us safe. And this is what a lot
yeah.
of people don't realize. That's its job. It's not to be our friend, and we feel like we're enemies with it quite a lot. But actually, it's always working for our greater good to keep us
Mm,
alive. And if you're somebody, and this isn't the case for everyone, but if you're someone who's been abused as a child, your mind thinks, okay, what can I do now to protect you from this? Okay, I need to
mm,
make you unattractive. I need to build a layer of protection, whatever. Okay,
mm,
if you have then got that belief system in place, no amount of dieting is going to get rid of that.
no,
Weight also is a great hiding place for people.
yeah,
They're not seen.
yes.
They think they're not seen if they're overweight. So if you think, I'm not good enough, what I don't matter, I've got no value, which are like really common things I see with women who've got weight issues. They want to be
Mm,
invisible. They don't want to be seen. They want to hide away. And this weight then becomes this cloak of invisibility almost.
Yeah, and it becomes a
And it's
self-fulfilling
just,
prophecy, isn't it? That they just believe that and they make it happen with this belief. And you said that it's comes
yeah.
from
And
the
the other
inside
thing
and
is like,
yeah.
yeah, absolutely. I had a client quite recently who's saying, and the other thing is when people have had a weight issue for a long time, even when they diet and get rid of the weight, it becomes very unsafe. So I had a client recently and she'd lost the weight years ago and she said, I just didn't know how to be skinny because it brought up a whole load of, what does a
Oh,
skinny person do? Well, they're successful. Well, I'm not successful. Well, they go out, well, I don't go out. I want to hide away. Actually,
mm,
it became really unsafe for her to
mm,
keep the weight off because the mind's kind of protecting her, keeping her in this invisibility space. So actually,
wow.
we have to do that inner work for it then to become completely and utterly safe, and for her to go out in the world and be a kind of skinny person, what she believes a skinny person looks and acts like, with
Yeah,
confidence, with, self-assurance, with all of that. So you've got to work on all of that first in
yeah.
order for you then to have the long-term results.
Mm. And you mentioned self-love in your introduction, which is an interesting concept for most people. We have to be kind to everybody else. We have to look after everybody else. We have to be responsible for everybody else. Self-love, what is that?
Yeah,
Where does that even come into it, right?
I know.
So tell
Yeah.
me a little bit about
And it can feel
self-love.
quite selfish. So with my clients, the number one thing is that they always put everybody else before them
Yeah.
without, I see it. I don't think there's ever been a client that I've had that hasn't been the case. And that comes
Mm.
from a place of low value, low self-esteem, all of that. It comes from a place of wanting to be good enough, wanting to prove our worth, give to everybody else and abandoning
Mm.
ourselves in the process. But actually, it is that really boring analogy that everyone uses, and I apologize. But it is about putting that oxygen mask on first.
Yeah.
When you start to look after yourself first, you can look after other people better. When you're mentally well in your head, when you're healthy, when your weight's right, when you're eating healthily, all of that, you can look after everybody else better. But it can feel
Mm.
so fearful because it's like, I've got to prove my worth. I've got to prove my worth. I've got to prove my worth by giving. But
Yeah.
that in itself has a knock-on effect with the overeating, because what happens is we become quite passive aggressive in our minds. It's like, why are they
Mm.
asking me to do this? Why did I say yes to that? And all of
Yeah.
that passive aggressiveness, which we daren't say out loud in case we're rejected, because oh my God, that would mean we're good enough. So then we
Yeah.
just go to food to feel better. And it's just like this circle
Oh,
of like
yeah.
destruction.
And
And
yeah,
it's
and
just,
it becomes a vicious cycle because we again with the working for
yeah,
everybody else and trying to get other people's approval and pleasing others, we are looking for the problem outside of ourselves, solution outside of ourselves, just to prove that we are good enough. But we don't need to prove it to anyone
yeah.
else because no one else cares. We need to know, we need to believe that we are good enough so people can see that. It's just kind of law of attraction. You attract those sort of people who always wants your help
Yeah.
and with the takers, as you say,
I
right?
know, and actually, you do. I find with all the women that I've worked with, and myself included, once you start to up level your value,
Yeah,
people don't take the piss in the
yeah,
same way. They
yeah,
don't. They value you more when you value. People value you to
yeah,
the extent that you think your value is worth.
yeah.
And actually, when you start to put boundaries in place, it's like, oh my God, what's a boundary? Like when women come to me, they're like, boundary. But when you start to put that in place, people have more respect for you.
That's
And
right.
actually, boundaries are really good for both parties. It feels
Mm,
comfortable. It's much better for both parties. And then you're not kind of in that passive aggressiveness. Like, I
yeah.
remember one client, she was the queen of passive aggressiveness up here. It was all going on up here. But actually, when you start to rework those stories and all of that, um and then they're able to put those boundaries in place, able to say no, able to give up the people pleasing, and actually your relationships become much better,
Mm.
much better. And the people that suck the life out of you before, they go and find someone else.
Someone else's cycle.
They do. Yeah, they suck the life out of some other poor sucker, you know. They will always get their fix.
Yes.
It doesn't have to be you.
No, oh my God, this is incredible. I know we can talk about this for hours, but you mentioned earlier that when you help people, you literally change people from this really binge eating, stress eating, whatever, within a matter of weeks. Just can you tell our listeners
Yeah.
how can this be possible?
Yeah, I mean it's one of those things, particularly with people who've had food issues. So most of my clients have, are typically over the age of 40, so they've had it for decades, and they're
Mm,
like, oh my God, how can you do this in a matter of weeks? But I think the biggest misconception is that we've been sold this idea from a multi-billion pound dieting industry that diets are the answer. And actually they end up making us put on more weight,
mm,
and they leave us feeling tired and frustrated because we inevitably fail. I would say fail like that because you can't fail at something that's designed not to work. So the minute
yeah.
you give yourself deprivation, your mind wants it all the more. But we're
Mm,
bought into this idea also that we've got to spend years and years and years in therapy. And I don't have anything against therapy, don't get me wrong, but actually for fixing this issue, it doesn't work. Going over and over and over the past makes that your present. The mind
yeah.
can't differentiate between past and present. So
Yeah.
the whole time you're going over and over and over that past, that becomes your present. I know I mentioned that earlier, but you will then go and use food to feel better. What we've got to do is, yes, we've got to recognize the past because it does have had a part to play in where we are now, but we've got to kind of connect the dots, understand how that past has affected us, but then we have to uh, do the healing work through kind of lots of different modalities, which can be done very, very quickly
Mm,
without hours and hours of talking therapy. And then ultimately we let it go and we learn how to move on. We learn how to cope with our emotions. We learn how to put those boundaries in place. We learn how to change the bullshit stories that we've been living with for however long. So, so at this subconscious level, we've got to change some of that, but also consciously on a day by
mm,
day basis, we kind of got to look at, okay, what is it that how is it that I'm showing up in the world? What are my actions telling me?
mm.
Okay, what do I need to change in my thinking patterns in order to have a different action?
Yeah, yeah. And most people, I mean, like you said, we've grew up with these sort of things. We believe that we don't have a choice. We have to do this. And I say to my clients, you don't have to do anything. You can choose right now. I have to go to, you don't have to go to work. You're choosing to go to work. So what else can you choose? It's like we have no choice over how we think, what we feel, or what we do, but we do. Of course, past trauma is a whole different level to that. But until we realize we can choose, um, it's a bit kind of outside of ourselves. We have to look elsewhere to get it sorted. So it's great that you're sorting this from the inside out. And as you said, the subconscious work is very quick. And I find that any words we say to ourselves, talk therapy, you said about constantly talking about the same thing over and over and over. It might lighten the load a bit, as it says, as it saying goes. But after a while, you're focusing more on it. You're not letting it go
Yeah,
away.
ultimately, yeah, it doesn't move us forward. It
No,
really doesn't. And
yeah,
that's the thing, and that's what keeps us stuck. But
yeah,
most people, and myself, I was included in that, we haven't grasped the concept that we have choice. That's such a
yeah,
good point that you made. And it was like, I remember like years ago when that light bulb moment came to me, and it's like, I don't have to say yes to things. And it was a bit like, oh, I can actually say no. And when my clients get that light bulb moment that we've got a choice,
yeah,
it's like, just because somebody says you've got to, I don't know, say you look after your mother until whenever, doesn't mean you have to do it. And actually,
mm,
a lot of clients have got quite toxic relationships with their parents, and sometimes they choose to move away from those relationships, and that's okay.
yeah,
Certainly, when I moved away from my relationship with my mum, it
mm,
took me years to realise that I could do that, and it's okay.
yeah,
And it's safer for me and healthier for me,
and the guilt and
and
shame, of
it's all
course.
right.
Yeah, the guilt and shame
Yeah.
if you do it, when you choose it, all those pressures that we put on
Yeah.
ourselves because someone else has done it in that way, isn't it? So yeah. And
Exactly.
exactly. I'm sure people are dying to know, is it possible to eat cake and still lose weight?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it is, Um, so I still eat cake and chocolate. I love it. I love cake and chocolate. I'm not going to give those things up. But it's about not having that traumatic, frenzied relationship with food.
Mm,
Where we get people to is like the 80 kind of 20 rule. If you're 80% of the time you're kind
mm,
of eating healthily, 20% of the time you're not. That's the place to get to. That for me is what a kind of normal healthy relationship with food looks like. If we take clients, and I could take, actually, no, let me phrase it another way. If I took 100 people who didn't have an issue with food and I told them to count calories every day for a month, at the end of that, and track what they're eating, at the end of that, without a shadow of doubt, they would want cake, they would want chocolate, they
mm,
would end up with some kind of food issue. And it's like, I think at the minute they've got that program about the jungle, and but where they're
oh,
deprived from food in the jungle. I'm a celebrity, that's it.
yes,
Where all they do is talk about food, and that's the big
yes.
problem with diets. The minute we deprive ourselves of something, we want it all the more. Then
Mm,
you say, no, you can't have that, you can't have that, you can't have that, and so it becomes this big thing, and then food becomes
mm,
hugely powerful. Actually, we've got to take away the power from food, and no food is banned, which
yeah.
is like a really difficult concept for people who've been dieting their whole lives to
True.
understand. And it's like, what? I can eat whatever I like. And they're like, well, if I eat whatever I like, then I'm just gonna like eat loads. And it's kind of, well, you do that anyway. And actually on a diet, because you'll diet, and then you'll come crashing down off the diet because you'll go, oh, screw it. You know, I've had one piece of cake. Oh, I might as well have loads now. Whereas
Yeah.
if you don't give food that power, the chances of you having that massive binge are way, way, way reduced.
Yeah.
And the other thing about dieting is that we start these faddy diets. We go into it, oh my God, it's the next best thing. I'm just going to live on air for the next 3 days. And, and you lose that weight really quickly, which actually it's you lose about 43%, I think, as muscle, which then
Mm,
screws up your metabolism. It slows that metabolism down,
yeah.
which then means when you go and binge again, when you've had enough of eating air for 7 days, you will then go and binge. But because your metabolism has slowed down, that
Ah.
binge will be even more calorific. So you will end up putting on even more weight. So every time you diet and you kind of fall off the wagon, so to speak, each
Mm,
time it's harder and harder and harder every time you go back onto that diet.
yeah.
Whereas if you give up the dieting, you can actually eat more.
Yes. And it all comes back to the self-love and choice. If you love yourself, I am fueling my body with what serves it. I'm choosing to eat. I'm choosing to eat this piece of cake because at the end of the day, even if you have a small piece or 5 pieces, it's still not going to make a difference at the end of the day. And in fact, after the second piece, you probably get fed up with it. And that's why the guilt and shame plus the extra horrible feelings in the stomach starts to get into you.
Yeah, and I find it astounding, and again, this was me, that we beat ourselves up about eating a piece of bloody cake. And it's like, I haven't committed triple homicide. And yeah, it's like, oh my God, I'm a terrible person. I'm awful. Oh God, no one's gonna love me. What? Because I had a bit of cake. You know? But that's
And
what, women in particular do,
yeah,
and the clients that I see do. And I just say to them, have you killed 3 people? What is so bad about eating chocolate and cake that you've got to give yourself this horrific dialogue, you
it's so
know?
funny. This morning, my daughter, who's 8, she was saying to me, "Oh yeah, I look fat with these trousers." She's only 8. Come on. I said,
Wow.
first of all, in order to look fat, you need to be fat. You're not fat, so you don't look fat. And people, you don't. It's people will think that they will laugh at me. I said, Nobody cares. they laugh at themselves, they're not laughing at you. I was like, oh, no one cares about me. I said, oh my God. I said,
You opened
no,
a can of worms.
everyone really cares about themselves. By saying other people will laugh at me, you're only caring about yourself. Then she's thought for a second. I was like, okay, yeah, we just changed something here. So it's just really teaching them at this moment, it doesn't matter what other people think, because what other people think isn't about you, it's about them mostly.
Yeah, completely. You know,
So
even when they criticize you openly, it's never about you. It's what they don't like in themselves.
exactly, yeah. I was listening to
I'm glad
Abraham
she's
Hicks.
getting it at 8 years old. I wish I'd
Well,
got it at 8. I tell you.
don't we all, right?
Yeah, it would have saved me a whole lot of trouble. And not
Yes,
just with
indeed.
food and weight, with terrible relationships and God, all sorts.
Well, then again, we are all here for our own lessons and things to learn in
Indeed.
life, isn't it? Perfect. So, one piece of advice before we leave this podcast for everybody at Christmas coming up with all the good food in front of them, what would you say to them?
Oh man, man, oh man. Yeah, do you know, Christmas is probably the worst time for people who overeat, emotionally binge eat. It's this
Mm,
love-hate thing. It's like, oh my God, I can eat whatever I like because they give themselves permission.
mm,
But then there's the guilt and shame that comes with it. So I would give three pieces of advice to take away. First of
okay.
all, I would say you've got to give up on the perfection. Like everybody gets so involved in Christmas. I've got to have the perfect turkey. I've got to have the perfect presents. I've got to have, the table laid out. Like, excuse my language, but no one gives a fuck what napkins you've got, whether they match the tablecloth and the table. No one cares. What, but yet we get into our heads about all this stuff, which becomes so stressful, and then we go to food to overeat. What
Mm,
people care about is having a fun time with you. What they will
yeah.
remember if you don't give up the perfection is how stressed you are. And no one likes that. So, first of all, I'd say give up the perfection. Secondly, I would say hit the pause button. You
Mm,
don't have to go to everything. You don't, you know what it's like. The relatives, oh, come and see us at Christmas. And then the in-laws, oh, come and see us at Christmas. And then friends, oh, come and see us at Christmas. Oh, and then we'll go to this event and that event and la 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 la. And before you know it, like your diary, it's not a holiday then. Actually hit that pause button and just think
mm,
to yourself, is this something that I want to do? First of all, and is this something that I've got capacity to do? And if you answer yes to both
mm.
of those, then say yes. But if it's a no, then do you know what? You can see someone in the new year. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And then third and finally, I would say enjoy your food. Enjoy
Mm,
it. It's Christmas. Enjoy it. When we enjoy food, when we give ourselves permission to eat that food, you will eat it much more slowly. You will eat without guilt. You will eat without shame. So you're far less likely to then eat more. You'll take your time, enjoy that food, give yourself the permission, eat the Christmas dinner, enjoy it, have some chocolates, don't beat yourself up, and just have a stress-free Christmas.
oh, that sounds amazing. I'm gonna listen to that and go do that. And sometimes, you know what? We're spending Christmas at home this year, and we don't even want to do Christmas dinner. We'll just do whatever we like.
That's
We
fine.
don't have to please
I've done
anybody. So,
Christmases without Christmas dinner. Yeah, one of the best Christmases I had was when we had like tapas style dinner.
yeah,
It was great.
I think we're gonna
Just
have a
because people
kebab.
say, yeah, why not?
Why not?
This is like somebody decided years and years ago that we would have turkey. I don't even like turkey.
I know, right? Of all the meat you could have.
Most people don't. It's too dry. Don't have
Exactly.
a turkey.
Yeah, have a plastic turkey. That's what I often
A
associate
plastic
with.
turkey.
That's what it tastes like when you have it
One
at
of those
work,
rubber
Christmas.
ones.
Yeah, tastes just like that
One of
most of
those
the
rubber turkeys.
time. Oh my
At least
God.
you'll have fun with a rubber turkey. Oh, that sounded a bit wrong.
I
Didn't mean it
know.
like that.
No, no, okay. Okay, good. I think we'll leave it at that one. Emily, before we
Yes, I
go,
think we
tell,
should.
that's all right. Tell our listeners where they can find you, how they can connect with you.
Yeah, so you can, if you want to know more about kind of help with overeating, binge eating, all of that, then visit my website, which is www.fresh-forward.co.uk, or you can find me on YouTube as Emily Hall, the Binge Eating Coach.
Excellent, excellent. And I will put all those in the show notes so people can find you. Emily, this has been a fascinating conversation. It's been lovely talking to you. Thank you for coming to the podcast.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. And I hope it, even if it's just helped one person out there, I hope it's done its job.
I hope so. Thank you very much. Thank you for tuning into another episode of the Finding Serenity in the Midst of Chaos podcast. If you love this episode, make sure to hit the subscribe button on YouTube and make sure you follow our podcast on any audio platforms that you love. And if you love this episode, please share with someone who you think is going to help. And we will see you in another episode next week. Thank you.